everybody, it's been a while, I think like a month or so. We wanted to get the boat down to Key West from North Carolina as fast as possible. So we haven't uploaded very much. We also had family visiting for several weeks. Just had to repair the boat and take care of the baby and work and all kinds of stuff. But now we're back. Okay.
Yes. Today's video is we realized that we've been living on the boat for just a little bit over a year now, and in that year we learned a ton of things, and we kind of wanted to share the top things we've learned living on a boat for a year. The first thing is that cruising is a full-time job that you're not getting paid for, meaning it literally takes probably at least 40 hours a week worth of work if you're moving the boat, if you're actively moving. If you're just sitting at anchor, that's a different story. But if you're moving around, hopping from place to place every few days or more constantly than that, it's a lot of work.
You have to constantly pay attention to everything, what's under the boat, over the boat, in front of the boat, on the water, your crew, everything.
Provisions, weather, mechanical systems, and the weather checking is a huge component of it. And then also the like the online reconnaissance of where you're going to go, because if you're going somewhere you've never been before, you really need to do your due diligence to make sure you don't get into trouble when you get there. It's hard to do other things because it takes so much of your time. The second one is resource conservation. We knew we'd have to conserve resources, but then experiencing it firsthand is a completely different story.
We've gotten better at showering, at doing the dishes, using less water.
Well, just being cognizant of water consumption, but also power consumption. Yeah, energy is like a hard one for us. We do have a water maker. We've not yet got it running since we've owned the boat. There's always been something higher up on the list. And we have been here in Key West. We've been around a mooring ball, and we've been on the ball for about a month. And yeah, creating our own power, just to power the fridge, power the computers, power the lights, all the different things we need. It's a big, making and using power is a much bigger component than I thought it would be. We have just ordered solar panels, so hopefully that's going to alleviate some of the situation. But there's also, you have to plan how much diesel you're going to use, how much gasoline you're going to use, and then kind of the counter side of that is black water, the sewage tanks. That is something that takes a lot more management than we realized ahead of time, and the toilets are just a pain. They're a pain.
We have a composting head now.
We have a composting head now, so we don't have to necessarily worry about a tank filling up and overflowing in an anchorage.
We haven't used it much yet, but we will.
Yeah, and we have a 35-gallon tank, Blackwater holding tank, and for 2 people, that'll last about a week. If you're really, really, really conservative about it, you might could get 2 weeks out of it. Third thing we learned living on a boat: everything is slow. Everything. Obviously getting around is slow. You're moving at 6 knots. Okay.
Laundry takes like all day, or grocery shopping takes like 3 or 4 hours, or
filling up our water tanks from the mooring ball by shuttling water back and forth, it's going to take a couple hours. Power generation, running the generator, that takes 3 hours maybe. Well, it depends on how frequently we run it, but it's slow. Getting groceries, for example, if we needed to run in and get trash bags, and it's the morning time, we have to lower the dinghy. Then we dinghy into the docks. That's 10 to 15 minutes. Tie up the dinghy, order a Lyft or Uber, since we don't have a car here. Ride over there, get that, reverse the process, and get back out. So just running real quickly to get garbage bags ends up being an hour-long process. So everything is slow on a boat, and you just need to plan on it being slow. Kind of in line with that, everything you fix or build on a boat is custom. This is something I didn't really realize before we bought the boat. And as I started working on it, it slowly kind of dawned on me that every single thing, there's never going to be something that just fits in place that you buy at Home Depot. You're pretty much going to have to tweak everything.
And it's taken a lot longer than we thought to fix this boat up.
When we laid floor panels in our head, there wasn't a single floor panel that could go in unaltered. Because everything's an edge piece. So everything's...
That's an easier project too.
It's just slower because of that. Doable, but slower.
Number 5, the importance of creature comforts. It's important to have some things that are comfortable on a boat so you don't feel like you're camping all the time.
And that might vary person to person, but we realized we did feel like we were camping until we got a standing shower, for example, for us, and a not easy flush toilet instead of those terrible hand pump toilets.
And a nice bed.
Yeah, so we had a short list of things that we wanted to feel comfortable in the boat. And once we did, it started feeling much more like a home than like we were living in a tent or something. All right, number 6 is we learned the importance of a good dinghy. We've had a bad dinghy, and now we have a good dinghy. So we have perspective.
We should show some pictures.
Yeah, we have perspective on both sides of this scenario here. The dinghy that came with the boat was unregistered and had been unregistered for a number of owners. So there was no way we were ever going to register it and make it legal. On top of that, it was a 2-stroke outboard that was constantly giving us issues, and it always had a leak. No matter how many patches I put on it, the patches themselves would always leak at the edges.
That's one thing we learned. We just assumed when we bought the boat, the dinghy came with it. We didn't know that you had to register it in your name separately from the major big boat.
Yep. So, and you can't U.S. Coast Guard document the dinghies, so you have to state register the dinghies, and it's a pain. But we use the dinghy a lot, especially if you're at a marina. Okay, maybe it's different, but if you're cruising or if you're in a situation like us where you're anchoring out a lot or mooring a lot, you use the dinghy all the time. It's your workhorse. Honestly, you move the dinghy more than you move your boat probably, and as such, you really need a reliable dinghy. Otherwise, you're going to spend an inordinate amount of time working on the dinghy. I know, I've been there, we've done that. And the dinghy is your work truck. You use it for everything. So I guess if I was giving myself advice from the get-go, I would have tried to tell myself to get a better dinghy sooner.
Yeah. It's good we have a new dinghy now because we have a baby and we need it to be reliable.
Yeah. The next thing we got a better understanding of after living on the boat for a year was weather and weather patterns. It's completely different from looking, watching the weatherchannel.com and seeing what they say the forecast is. There's so many more factors to understanding weather, and it's kind of one of those things that takes time. You watch and learn, and see what happens. Now we have a much better understanding of how the different pressure systems will affect the wind directions and temperatures and humidity, and also how it's very important lesson we learned was to watch for wind against current, because in my opinion that's one of the #1 determining factors for how comfortable it is while underway.
I think we learned that the first week.
Obviously you're going to learn about weather, but that's one of the things we've just got a much better appreciation of while living on a boat for a year. Number 8, always have a plan B and probably a plan C. And this goes for everything. It may be your plans for the day, it may be your plans for the anchorage for the night, it may be your plans for your destination for the next couple days. Always have a plan B and a plan C, because fairly frequently with boating, you end up resorting to plan B or C or D. So it's always good to, even on a micro scale, if you're coming in a channel and you're like, my main plan is to approach it this way, maybe have a backup plan to bail out, and just be thinking about that so it's not last moment. That's helped us a number of times, and it's just prudent. In addition to having plan B's and C's, it's also have spares on board your boat for the more important systems. The more time you spend on your boat, you'll realize which things tend to break more frequently, and you'll buy more of those spares. You do need to keep in mind that this is the name of the game. Have backups, and the spares are your plan B's and C's for mechanical failures, because there will be mechanical failures. More than you think there will be. That's another thing we learned.
Number 9, engines are very important on a sailboat too.
Yes.
We have needed the engines and they have broken a lot.
Some folks are sailing purists. I think you can only be a sailing purist if you don't have a time schedule, but for us, we always seem to have some sort of time pressure with regard to either seasonal temperatures,
or
baby or whatever. We always seem to have some sort of time pressure, and that means we end up going when the wind is not necessarily in our favor. We don't go in bad weather, but we go when we might not be able to sail. Most of the time, I'd say probably at least 50% of the time, we're motor sailing. So we do make use of the sails, but we probably 80% of the time have the engines on, maybe more than that, which is kind of a sad state of affairs, but I just consider it this way: trawlers always have their engines on, so whatever we get without engines is a bonus.
Yeah, I would love to sail more. We sail when we can.
Number 10 is there are very, very few set it and forget it things on a sailboat, which means that you're just constantly having to watch over, monitor, keep an eye on all the different systems of the boat. Entropy is very real out here. Things want to break, and you need to be vigilant for that. So there's very, very few things on our boat that don't require some sort of vigilance, so some monitoring. That said, you just kind of build a habit for it, and you learn that, check your pump so frequently, always check your engines on a semi-regular basis, things like that. I think the only thing we don't really have to monitor personally are things that have been digitally monitored, like the batteries, and we still check them frequently. So,
number 11, we've learned to live minimalistically on a sailboat because it's a very small space. It's
a tiny home. I think it qualifies by that definition. Minimalistically in this regard is interesting because we actually have a ton of stuff. We have tools and redundant systems, and we carry a lot of food and a lot of water and backup fuel, and that's a lot of things. But there's very little surplus. There's very little unnecessary things on the boat. And the style of living is, if you don't clean up after yourself, it gets very dirty very quickly. So having fewer things helps with that, but very much appreciate what living in a small space is like on the boat. Catamaran, I think, is even it gives you the feeling of having more room than you actually have with the two-hull design.
Number 12, we've learned to trust the boat. At first, we were more nervous in certain weather on the boat, and we weren't sure if the boat could handle it, but now it's a breeze. We don't think about it anymore. It's just become normal, and we trust the boat.
Yeah.
Take care of us.
Instead of worrying is the boat gonna break, we tend to more go by is the ride gonna be comfortable enough for us, for the dog, for the baby.
We know the boat can handle it.
Yeah, we've been in a couple storms where the boat performed like there was nothing, and we realized the limiting factor was us. So yes, we maintain the boat, we watch the boat. We're not going to think that the boat's not ever going to break, but as on the whole, the boat is reliable and trustworthy, and we're less nervous. We're still cautious, but we're less nervous.
Number 13, we learned what we want on our next boat.
We went into owning a boat with completely open mind, and we figured we'd make do, and we have. But for whatever our next boat purchase is, we've learned what we want.
We know what to look for.
One of the big things is we're not probably going to do the owner's conversion again, because that process is very long and still ongoing. It's turning out really well.
Yeah, I like the bathroom, how it's turning out.
And our closets are going to be really nice, and on a whole, it's going to be really good. But it's a very long and slow process, and we wouldn't do that again. But we do like the owner's version feel for it. Small heads just aren't for us. Then other things like, well, we can make a whole list on it, and the last thing, number 14, we've learned is that it's not all work and toil. There is a lot of that, but there are some really high highs in doing this.
The highs are worth it.
You get to experience things that many people will never experience, and are kind of off the path for the public domain, so to speak. So that in and of itself, the sense of adventure, the sense of exploration, is very cool. The getting reattached to nature in a much more visceral fashion day to day is also, sometimes it might be a downside if the wind and weather's bad, but more often than not, if you do a good job planning where you're going to be, where the weather is, it's really pleasant. I mean, right now we're sitting in Key West. Right now it's January. The Key West and the Keys area is the warmest spot in the continental United States right now. So
yes, that's nice. Last year we were stuck in Charleston in the snow.
Yeah, 8 inches of snow on the boat at this time of year, with all the heaters running and taxing the electrical system.
So we're like, we need to get to the warmth this year.
A quick aside, the reason we haven't gone down island, the Bahamas, or even further, which was our plan, is twofold. One is because the baby, we just want to make sure she stays on her immunization schedule before we start traveling really abroad with her. And two is I've started a new job a few months ago online, and we don't yet have good enough satellite comms to allow me to work remotely. And that's something we're budgeting for. There is a solution out there for it, but we gotta save a lot of money for that. So in the meantime, we're gonna stay where we have signal. which is going to be the U.S. and or nearby, maybe the Bahamas. We'll see. And as part of, there's really good highs. It's not all work and toil. There really is a sailing community. You hear about it when you're doing your research, but we've just time and time again experienced that sense of community, that sense of like, you know, we're all out here together, and we all have similar hardships to deal with in our boats, and that creates a bit of kinship in the community that's just more or less inherent, not universal, but more or less inherent. And you also meet really interesting people. Not gonna lie, there's a fair bit of quirky folk who live out on boats, but they're really interesting to talk to and hear their stories and what they're into, what they want to get into, where they want to go.
It's very interesting.
This is not a common path to take, and people get here by very different and circuitous routes. So that's what we learned in a year of living on a boat. A lot of work, but I feel like we've maybe had a little bit more work than the average scenario because we're still getting into it in our boat. The big, huge projects we've taken on with our boat at the same time. We were actively cruising. At the same time, we had a baby. At the same time, I got a new job, and so on and so forth. So I feel like we maybe gave ourselves a little bit more than what the average workload would be, but it's starting to pay off. I think things are starting to get better.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this video. We have more content that we want to get out, and we'll see when we get it out. Let us know if you have any questions. Maybe we'll see you in the next video, and maybe we'll see some of you guys around here because there's so many of you in the community nearby. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Oh. Hey.